Alright, I'm back with another video. I am so happy. I woke up today to see that my channel boomed again. Now, you might laugh at me, but for YouTube to show my stuff to 740 people, even having, I think it was like less than 30 people who actually clicked on a video, but even that much is just way more than I ever imagined. I've tried doing YouTube multiple times now. I never really got much of a following. As it stands now, the 9 subscribers that I have on this channel are probably mostly friends and family members. But yeah, let's get into another video. I've got Answers in Genesis video pulled up, and Ken Ham is the person speaking apparently.
A science teacher in the public schools in Australia, and one of the first science lessons I taught, one of the students said, "Sir,
you should not be teaching science lessons in a school." I don't have anything against creationists, but something tells me that this guy wasn't actually teaching real scientific facts. Something tells me he was teaching bullshit and pseudoscience.
You're a Christian." That's right. "Well, you believe the Bible, but that can't be true. We know the Bible's not true." Why is that? Because of what our textbooks teach us about ape men and about evolution. What I found was...
Okay, first things first, I'd really like to know what age range class that he taught. Because, first of all, that kid seems like he has a lot of misconceptions, about science. And Ken Ham is probably going to go on to say that the textbooks are wrong and shit like that, but we know that the Bible is wrong because it posits many facts, and a large majority of those facts that it posits have been proven to be wrong, including but not limited to the flood and the age of the earth as well. Actually, I don't think it ever even says anything about the age of the earth, but it also states that there are talking animals. It states that there are men who live for like hundreds of years, and that is just bullshit.
Was when I was a teacher, that there were students in my classes in the public school who thought that they couldn't believe the Bible, and they weren't prepared to listen to the message about Jesus Christ because their textbooks told them that they evolved, and therefore in their mind the Bible wasn't true.
So I believe in having an open mind to anything, but to really think about the things that you are listening to. Because, yeah, it's really easy to hear, "Oh, the earth is flat," and go, "You're wrong," and not listen to them. But when you listen to the people, you realize a lot of the time that they're not just wrong, but they believe these things wholeheartedly. And I believe that that's it can be a good thing. But you have to help these people actually think about what they believe in. But you can only really do that if they have an open mind as well. And it's very, very hard to find people who have an open mind who are as what's the word? Who are as ride or die as the people in that room are. As the people in that room with Ken Ham, they are so close-minded that they most likely will never actually listen to the arguments of an atheist or somebody of a different religion. And that saddens me. That honestly saddens me, because learning is one of the biggest strengths of human beings.
And one of the things that I started to do then was to help them understand that evolution has not been proven by science.
Which is exactly why he shouldn't have been teaching children. I don't know how the hell he managed to get in that position as a teacher in an actual public school, but that's not good. Because evolution is a scientifically proven fact.
And actually, when you understand observational science, it actually confirms the...
So I heard this from Forrest Falcai, and it hits the point home that I want to get across here. And it's when theists or other pseudoscientists go and they say observational science, what it really means is science they can't bullshit their way out of. And I'd like to say something that I've said before on this channel, and that's that if you know the cause and you know the effect, and you can test the cause and the effect of something, you know it exists. That's why even if we couldn't see God, the reason why we say that God isn't real, or the reason why atheists say that God isn't real, I'm not an atheist anymore, but I'd never push my religion on somebody else like Ken Ham does here. But the reason why atheists say that God isn't real, or why they say that there's no proof that God is real, is not because we can't see him. It's because we cannot test his existence. And if God existed like these people say he does, we would be able to test his existence. But we cannot. Which means either he has absolutely no hold on your life as it exists now, or he doesn't exist.
The Bible's history.
Have you ever heard this? Billions of years ago, there was an explosion in space. Or 100,000 years ago, this happened or that happened. Or even, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Question, how does anyone know? I mean, was anybody there to...
Because we can see the effects that the Big Bang brought about. We don't know the cause, so we don't know exactly what it was, but we know that it had an effect, so we still know it existed. That's why a lot of the time you won't see people like scientists talking a lot about the Big Bang, because we don't know what caused it, as far as I know from recent research.
to observe it? Well, actually somebody was, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Check this out. First of all, we need to recognize that there is a huge difference between observational science and historical science. Both are valuable, but very different. Let's define the two real quick, shall we? Observational science is simply when we observe something and experiment to draw conclusions. It involves...
So, pretty much what he's getting at here is science that we can actually see happening. And while we've seen natural selection happening, and we know the cause and the effect, the issue with a lot of the things that creationists specifically say is that that is microevolution, not macroevolution. And some of them will use different vocab words, but it's essentially the same thing. They're splitting hairs between microevolution and macroevolution. We have seen microevolution happen, but by the definition of their observational science, we can never really categorize macroevolution as observational science because it happens too slowly for us to actually see macroevolution happening. The issue with this is that we know it exists. We know the cause, and that's microevolution, and we know the effect. So we know it exists, and we know what causes it, we know what it does. So to say that it doesn't exist because we never saw it happening is plainly ignorant. And the other thing is that you can very easily use that argument on creationism as well. Because no person alive today was there to witness the Bible being created and could say definitively that it was written by God.
Involves repeatable experimentation and observations in the present. It's through observational science that we find cures for diseases and build space shuttles, stuff like that. Now, through historical science, we consider things that happened in the past, but they cannot be checked in the same way. I mean, we don't have access to the past like we do the present because, well, it's gone, right?
Once again, cause plus effect equals existence. It means it left a mark, and we know why it left a mark. It means that we can know that things happen without directly observing them.
We really have a speculation, or at best, circumstantial evidences of past events based on what we see in the present. That's not to say that we can't make intelligent guesses about the past or form reasonable inferences from rocks or fossils in the present, but we certainly cannot directly test our conclusions because we cannot repeat the past. Got it? So, does that mean...
But we can. If we know the cause, which is learned through trial and error, and many hypotheses, and also experiments, we can recreate these events. We can do that. And we can observe it. The only reason observational science even happens is because we know that those things happened in the first place. So we go out to recreate what caused it.
mean historical science is unimportant? Not at all. Let's drop an example down here for a minute and take a look at the Eiffel Tower. You know, that 19th century Parisian monument designed by Gustave Eiffel that stands 1,063 feet tall, which was built as the entrance for the 1889 World's Fair and is still the tallest building in Paris today, visited by millions of people each year? Yeah, that one. Well, guess what? Everything I just told you is true, but how do we test it?
Okay, first of all, that was a really long explanation of the Eiffel Tower, and I hope it's actually going somewhere.
Well, applying observational science, we can, of course, observe the Eiffel Tower anytime we're in Paris. It's here in the present. Then we...
Effect.
We can continue by testing the height and comparing it to all the other structures in Paris and confirm the claim that it is indeed the tallest building in Paris. But that's the extent of the kind of facts that can be proved by observational science in reference to this claim. How do we really...
You realize that if we had, like, video recording back then, we'd be able, like, we know it exists, we know how tall it is. If we had a video recording from back then, would you categorize that as observational science? Because we can visually see it happening through the video. That is a very good question. And I'd actually like to hear what Ken Ham's answer is to that. Because if we had a video of, let's say, the Big Bang, would he say, oh yeah, that must have happened? You want to be let in on a little tidbit? Light travels at a finite speed. Meaning that the further out you look into the universe, the further back in time you're viewing the objects. And you know, this is very interesting because we have the technology to peer out billions of years ago, and we can see what it was like directly after the Big Bang. You gonna refute that, Ken Ham? I'd be really curious as to see what you'd say.
We know that Gustav designed it? How do we really know it was built in the 19th century as an entrance to the 1889 World's Fair? How do we really know how many people visited? That's all in the past. It can't be repeated. For that kind of information, we need to go outside the limits of observational science and discover what has been communicated to us through historical documents and eyewitness accounts. And furthermore, we have to believe those eyewitnesses and
So, I see what he's getting at here. He is going to say that the Bible is real because of the eyewitness accounts. And ordinarily you'd be right. Ordinarily, you'd be absolutely right. But the thing is that the Bible was written almost maybe even over 100 years after, like, the New Testament was written almost, if not more than 100 years after the events that it states. And the thing is that the eyewitness testimony 100 years after something happens is, like, without any documents or anything, is very, very weak. Because you know what that is? That's word of mouth. You ever heard of the telephone game? This is a reference I make in these videos a lot. Have you ever played the telephone game as a kid? Ironically, I played it in church when I was younger. And the way that the game goes is you sit in a circle, one person takes a phrase or a word or something, and they whisper it to the next person along that circle. And then that person does it to the next person, and so on and so forth, until you get to the end. The person at the end says what they heard, and you compare that to what the original word or phrase was. And most times you do that, it ends up completely different. Now picture that over the course of 100 years. No eyewitness testimony is going to be wholly accurate after that time. And I'd be willing to say that most eyewitness testimony after that large amount of time would be completely inaccurate.
Documents are trustworthy.
Dear Lord, only 3 minutes in. He has fit a lot of bullshit into 3 minutes.
The same is true when we talk about the origin of the Earth. The Earth is here. We all agree with that. So, does observational science confirm that the world was created by God? And are there trustworthy documents and eyewitness accounts that confirm it? Well, let's take the last part first. In short, what we're really asking is my original question: was anybody there to observe it? The answer is yes. God was there, and he told us how he created.
According to literally the Bible, it was not handwritten by God. Supposedly, God whispered in somebody's ear and told him to write this. And I'm sorry, but I'm not gonna trust one person over 1,500 years ago, and that's being generous. I don't know when the both halves of the Bible were actually written, but I'm not gonna trust one singular person piecing together events by a dude who cannot be seen whispering in his ear, and also, oh yeah, this guy's grandpa knew Jesus when he was alive, and here's the story of how his grandpa met Jesus. I'm not gonna trust that. That is not trustworthy.
He inspired people to write down his very words that became books that were compiled into a complete book called the Bible, which has been verified over and over again and has demonstrated...
Has not been verified over and over again. The fuck are you talking about? Care to cite some sources, Ken Ham?
...itself to be totally trustworthy in all it claims and teaches. Even secular...
Bullshit.
Scholars will concede that the Bible accurately records historical events. Anyway, we have the most trust...
Just glossing over that. Who? Who says that? Are they a Christian? Do they have an objective view of this?
Trustworthy revelation from the most trustworthy eyewitness. Now, what about...
Bullshit.
Observational science. Does it confirm the Bible? Yes. And what's extremely important to realize is the observable...
Wasn't your whole thing with observable science that you can't call it observable science unless you were there to see it? What have you seen that can't be explained by something completely different?
Fact that the universe is logical and orderly. That makes sense only if its creator is logical and has imposed order.
I'm sorry, but the universe is illogical. From a physics, evolutionary, and just plain scientific viewpoint, the universe is fucked.
On his creation. It doesn't make sense at all if the universe is just an accident of a huge explosion. Also,
I'm sorry, but everything you can observe in biology shows that the human body just barely works well enough to get the job done, and sometimes it doesn't.
Our minds are able to comprehend many things about the universe, and that's only possible if the creator of the mind gave us the ability and desire to explore the universe. It doesn't make
evolution
sense if our brains are byproducts of chance, because we couldn't trust their conclusions to ever be accurate. And lastly, it only makes sense that we can...
I'm not going to give any evidence for this video, because if he doesn't feel like giving any evidence whatsoever, other than... oh yeah, trust me, bro, the Bible is wholly accurate. I'm just gonna tell it how it is. there is absolutely no evidence. Like, he has given absolutely no evidence. All he has said is, oh yeah, people say it's accurate. Who, Ken Ham? Who? Who says it's accurate? Is it one of your buddies?
Observe and repeat an experiment if the universe consistently obeys the same laws from day to day, which only makes sense if a lawgiver created it that way and upholds it. So to be bluntly honest, science itself...
Okay, this is another idiotic thing that is just a correlation between definitions. A law in scientific terms is not the same as a law as in, like, the court of law. It's simply not the same. It's the same word, but they're completely different definitions. And to say that, E equals MC squared is a law, so there must be a lawgiver, that's not how that works. Like, at all.
Itself, whether observational or historical, is only possible because God exists and the Bible is true.
Once again, the universe is not orderly. Like, there's a whole bunch of shit that's just fucking ridiculous that goes on in the universe.
Go on, but enough said.
Was it really God's wish to kill Abraham's elder son? Why Isaac needed to be
Christian ads now, bitch.
punished by...
And one of the verses of scripture that I've had at the forefront of my mind has been 1 Peter 3:15, where it says, always be prepared to give a defense.
Say it with me, folks. Bible or scripture is not valid evidence.
So to give an answer.
Many things in the Bible have been proven wrong, as stated before, including, but not limited to, the worldwide flood.
I've been asked many questions over the years, like where did Cain get his wife? What about the races of people? How do you explain dinosaurs? What about carbon dating? What about the millions of years? What about the Big Bang? How do you explain the so-called races of people? How do you know there's a God? Where did God come from? Who's heard those sorts of questions? Have you heard those sorts of questions? Oh, yeah.
That was a wide range of questions that could have come from a wide range of people, some of which including also Christians.
Yeah. Now, I can't go through all of them, but I'm going to go through a number of them to show you, as a Christian, we need to be able to give answers and defend our faith, and we can. And it's exciting because God's word is true. So let's start off with the first question here. Is there any evidence for an infinite God? That's one of the questions I've been asked. How do you know there's a God? Where did God come from?
Haven't tested it, haven't seen its effects. So chances are it doesn't exist.
And to answer this question, we're going to start by looking at that molecule of heredity that I'm sure we're all familiar with called DNA. You know, the helix...
Okay, I swear to God, if he is going to go, oh, DNA is so complex that it needs a designer. Like, dude. Please.
The structure of DNA was first discovered by two scientists called Crick and Watson back in 1953. Well, you know what, young people? We know today that scientists have studied a lot more about DNA, and we've found that DNA is not just chemistry. Let me explain that to you.
But it is just chemistry. That's all it is. It's chemistry.
Here is a rope that has beads on it. Beads representing dots and dashes. By the way, those dots and dashes actually spell out a word. It's the word help.
Okay, no. So, is he really going to compare DNA to Morse code? Because that's really stupid. That's even, like, that's way worse than what I thought he was going to do. I thought he was going to compare it to literal code. That's what I thought he was going to do. But this is even worse. Morse code isn't even, like, code as in, like, computer code. It's a language.
Help. How do I know that? Well, you only know that if you know the Morse code. If you know the Morse code, if you know the language...
Is he going to conflate Morse code and computer code?
Then you know that those dots and dashes actually spell out a word. But those dots and dashes don't mean anything to you unless you have the language. DNA has these beads, molecules, lined up in a particular order to write all this information that builds a human, or builds a dog, or builds a cat, or builds an elephant, or whatever. For instance, you're made of trillions of cells, and in nearly every one of your cells, you have all the information that builds you. It's been estimated if you were to type out all the information from one set of your genes, from one of your cells, it would fill, they used to say 1,000 books, 500 pages each, close type written. Now they say it's much more than that. And here's the interesting thing. That information is not in the molecules. The molecules are arranged in a particular order to write the information. Just like when I open up my Bible and I can read it, but the information I'm reading is not in the molecules. The ink has been arranged into letters and into...
This is a misunderstanding of what a molecule is. I think what he means to say is that it's not written, because I'm pretty sure the specific pieces of the double helix, those are atoms, not molecules. Or are they? I'm not sure. Okay, so nucleotides. Tiny composition. Okay, so they are. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't clear on that. I wasn't clear on whether they were elements or if they were individual chemicals.
Words and into sentences, and because I understand the language it's written in, that's where the information really is. But here's the interesting thing. You've got to have a language to read the information. And DNA itself has the information that makes the language to read the information, that makes the language to read the information, that makes the language to read the information. You get the idea?
Okay, this is a really dumb way of saying this. But technically the way that DNA works is DNA reads itself. That's kind of what he's getting at here. He's doing it in a really, really bad way. But DNA reads itself. DNA is copied, and then DNA creates, essentially.
Yeah. In other words, you've got to have the information, but you've got to have the language. If you don't have the language, then you can't read the information. It's all got to be there or it won't work. It's all got to be there at the same time. And you know one of the things that we found out? Languages only ever come from an intelligence, and information only ever comes from...
No. So first of all, DNA is not a language. Technically, it works similar to a language or to code, but it's not a guarantee that it's made by somebody just because it resembles that. And I would say that, you know, the crystalline structure of a diamond is the same thing, but Ken Ham is just gonna say that diamond was created by God too. So there's no real there's no real way to disprove this because of the way he's posing the question. And that's just not how the world works. So the thing is that, the way that, how do I explain this? Just because something resembles something that was man-made does not mean that it was man-made. Like, we can see, like, rock formations that look like bridges, but we know that they're natural formations, and we know the things that cause those natural formations. And like, it looks like a human structure, but it's not. There are, it looks like and it works like such and such is not an argument for they are the same thing, because there is a chance that they are not.
Information, DNA cries out that there's an intelligence behind life. It couldn't have happened by chance random process.
Did you think that the original, like, that the start of new words is not done by chance, that it's a conscious effort to create new words? Sometimes it is a conscious effort to create new words. But if you look at many of the words in the English language, a lot of them started out as slang. And many of them started out as slips of the tongue. Saying a word wrong, and then that new sound actually becomes a word. Or smushing two words together, that wasn't originally a word, but it's something somebody just did in passing, but it caught on. Languages do make themselves by chance. At least in some composition of a language is made by chance. Same with computer code. I've seen creationists liken DNA to computer code. And if you speak to any coder, they'll tell you that they've made code completely by accident that worked perfectly for what they wanted to do.
This is matter on its own could never produce DNA. But if life evolved, matter had to produce DNA. But that could never happen. I want you to watch one of these short videos we have from the Creation Museum that helps explain this a bit more.
Those fake ads really drive you mad, huh? The game looks so fun in the ads, but when you download it, it's a totally different game.
Because this is a pet peeve of mine, these guys do the exact same thing. Literally the exact same thing.
If you found an ancient clay tablet with strange characters washed up on the shore, you couldn't read it, unless someone had cracked the code. But you'd still know the letters represented a language, even if you didn't know anything else about the author or his civilization.
Actually, they could have just been doodles. Yeah, you could say that it's a language, but until you decipher it, there's no guarantee it is a language. And even if you do decipher it, there's a high possibility that you're just bullshitting. These could very well just be chalked up to artistic creation.
Language is recognizable, even if you can't read it. Take Morse code. It has 3 basic parts: dots, dashes.
Okay, I guarantee you, if somebody never heard of Morse code and they saw it for the first time, they'd have no fucking idea what it is. Like, especially somebody from ancient times, they would have no idea that that's like a code, like for a language.
And spaces. These three simple parts are combined to represent letters. There are 26 letters in the English language, which are combined to form over 400,000 words. Those words can, of course, be combined into an infinite number of sequences or sentences. There is evidence that DNA represents a language. 4 basic units, called nucleotides, combine into a code for 20 amino acids. From those few amino acids, the body forms more than 100,000 proteins. Even if you can't read DNA, it still has all the hallmarks of language.
I mean, kind of. But you have to have more evidence to back it up than it looks like such and such. And it works like such and such. You need more than that to actually say that it was made by an intelligent being.
A language that biologists are just now beginning to crack. Every tiny cell in our body is packed with 3 feet of DNA, 3 billion nucleotides. The similarity between DNA and human language is uncanny. In addition to codes, both use similar techniques to pack, access, rearrange, copy, and translate information. DNA seems to represent a language, the language of life. An unseen author, the creator of heaven and earth, has left a testimony of his existence in the DNA of every living thing.
For those who believe in evolution, they believe that millions of years ago, somehow life had to arise from matter. As you think about...
I've said this before, I'll say it again. Evolution says nothing about the origin of life. What Ken Ham is talking about here is not called evolution. Get that out of the way. It is, however, I don't remember the word. Abiogenesis. There we go. It's called abiogenesis.
About that, it's not just a matter of saying life arose from matter. Life is built on DNA. You've got to have DNA to arise from.
Okay. First of all, that's not how that works. RNA was the first, DNA may be the building blocks of, our lives. But, there are many creatures. Okay, so, let me, what was the first cell made of? RNA. Self-replicating RNA in a membrane composed of phospholipids. Life did not start with DNA. It didn't. It just didn't.
Matter, but not just DNA. You've got to have a language system. Matter produces a language system. Matter has to produce information. People who believe in evolution don't believe.
No. Not how that worked. If you did even one Google search, you could have stopped spreading information.
In God, and people say matter gave rise to life. You've got to understand, matter had to give rise to zillions and zillions and zillions and zillions of bits of information.
If anybody wants to see that, that's by the National Institute of Health. So, yeah. Pause the video if you want to see it. Pause the video if you want to read, like, the paragraph that's from. There you go.
Information, and over millions of years, information keeps coming from matter, new information to form all the different kinds of animals and plants, zillions of bits of information. You know what's interesting? We've never seen matter produce one bit of brand new information that never previously existed.
Yes, we have. Don't fucking lie like that. Just because you were too lazy to look it up doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Not even one bit. An information scientist, Dr. Werner Gitt, wrote a book called In the Beginning Was Information. He's from Germany. And he makes these statements in that book. There is no known natural law through which matter can give rise to information. And he says this: a code system, in other words, a language, is always the result of a mental process. It requires an intelligent origin or inventor. DNA is a language system and an information.
Let me just look that up real quick. Ha-ha! Would you look at that? Would you look at that? German engineer and young earth creationist. You know what that doesn't say? Biologist. Fucking hell. You'd think that by this point they'd actually, like, big, like, organizations would actually, like, start, like, actually using worthwhile quotes. I'm gonna end this episode here because I think this has gone on for like 30 minutes or more.